Welcome to the RevRoom. I'm your host, Rachel Bryant. Join me each episode as we discuss the strategies of top marketing practitioners, uncovering the tactics that transform ideas into revenue. Whether you're a seasoned marketer or an aspiring leader, the RevRoom is your go-to source for actionable advice and industry trends. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and enjoy this episode. Today, we're diving headfirst into the wild world of annual planning. Yes, I know. Sorry to say the words annual planning. I know. Q4 is crazy. You're doing in the dark annual planning. I get it. But we're about to show you how to turn that frown upside down and actually enjoy annual planning again. Today, we're joined by my really good friend, Tiffany Pillifant, and she's on fire, giving you all the tips to align your marketing goals with business objectives. Trust me, by the end of this episode, you'll not only want to, but know how to get going on a data driven, cross functionally collaborative annual planning cycle. So let's get ready to plan like pros. Because remember, in the words of the great Benjamin Franklin, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. And you know what? Failure is so last year. So let's go. Hey, well, welcome everybody to the Rev Room podcast. We're really excited about the content today. We're going to talk annual planning. I know, fingers in your ears, la 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 la. It's the one thing we all hate to do, but we know we need to do. And honestly, if we don't do it, we're screwed in like 6 months from now. Anyways, so let's dive into some of the things that really help us develop really great annual plans. So I'm really excited about my guest today. Tiffany Pillifant's here to join us. Tiffany, I'll let you introduce yourself in a second, but all transparency. Tiffany and I've worked together before. We've done and gone through this process before. So I'm really excited for us to talk a little bit about how we've done that and how you've evolved your annual planning too since 6 years ago when we did it together. So welcome Tiffany to the podcast. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here, especially excited to talk about annual planning. I might be the only one on the planet excited to talk about it, but so I'm Tiffany Pillifant. I'm the Vice President of Marketing Operations and Technology, I should say, at Insperity. I've been doing marketing operations for quite a long time, but have kind of deep expertise across a lot of different verticals, including product and other technology fields. So I see annual planning from a lot of different angles. And it's complex everywhere you go, and it's as simple as you make it. So I think given my experience doing this for product, for software, for engineering, for strategy, and now for marketing, I think we've got something that works.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really excited to talk about this. I can't tell you how excited, but let's first start with our Rev Room sort of tradition, and that's we're going to talk about our favorite coffee mug or drinking vessel in the mornings, at least. And so I'll tell you mine, and I brought one especially for you today, Tiffany, because
Okay.
I know how much you love spreadsheets. So I
Yes.
brought my mug that says, "Ooh, this calls for a spreadsheet." My
Oh, I
favorite.
love that.
Yeah,
I do.
my
I love that. And I have two, and I hope that that's allowed because
yes,
there was one time you gave me a gift, which is this one, which I don't drink out of for a lot of good reasons, but it says, Lady in the streets, freak in the spreadsheets, which is
yes,
true, which is true. I do love a good spreadsheet and I can nerd out on formulas all the time. But my true favorite drinking vessel is this coffee mug. You can see it's very well worn, but I got it for free from LinkedIn. And it's a fellow coffee mug. And I'll tell you why I love it, because it's perfect. It doesn't have like one of those fancy sippy tops that you have to clean and you got like the special cleaner. You just take it off and drink it. It also is the exact right size for a shot of espresso with my coffee. And it gives the right flavor balance that I like. And the rim of it is not too thick, so it dribbles, and it's not too thin, so it feels like you're going to cut your mouth. So I
I
have a
got it.
lot to say about this
Yes,
mug, but this is mine,
yes.
and this is what I use. No one else may use
I love that, and I know you pretty well, Tiffany. So it encompasses everything I know about you, which is a very detailed analysis
it.
of the coffee drinking vessel. So now we
Right.
want to talk about deep analysis of the business and marketing so that we can get into annual planning. And I know that you're really an advocate of data driven goal alignment and really just finding out what's the business running after so that marketing can align to that. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach that and gather some of those business insights and and how you sort of start that process.
Yeah, of course. And I think, the data driven decision making is, all the buzz, and it will be for a long time. I talk about it a lot in terms of facts over feelings. But I want to clarify that because in marketing, there's a lot of feelings that make sense. We have a lot of intuition, we have a lot of gut, we have a lot of experience about what we do, what will resonate, what won't resonate. We tried that before, but we also have a lot of data. The best marriage is both of them. But for annual planning, you got to go with the data. And the reason is because if you're not aligned with the overall direction that the business is moving in, then you just relegate yourself to being a cost center rather than a growth engine. And so it's really difficult actually sometimes to gain alignment because there's this facts versus feelings. And
Mm.
if you're working in an organization that's driven mostly by feelings or by gut, then it will feel very strange to work off of facts. And in marketing, we rely on lots of direction from lots of different functions in order to get a really good picture of how we can help drive the business forward. We rely on product. We need to understand what product is doing, what they're saying, what they're launching, what matters, how it stacks up. We need to understand how we sit in the market in terms of our brand awareness and recognition and reputation. We need to understand what the financial goals are for the organization and how fast we're going to get there. Are we focusing on retention? Are we focusing on growth? In what markets? For what type of industries? And we need to understand what that looks like, not only in the next year, but in the next 5. Because as we know, some marketing tactics can be activated and they react quickly. Some have to saturate and marinate in the market before they can actually produce results. So it's really important that we're able to sit down with leaders cross functionally in the organization and say, what's the goal here? What are we all driving towards? What do you want to see happen? What does success look like for our business? Then we can take that back and translate this into, okay, what does that mean for marketing? So to me, driving that cross-functional alignment is the very first step and a prerequisite to being able to put together a good marketing plan.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing some of the items that you would maybe try to get from different aspects of the organization
Yeah.
and what some of those cross-functional teams look like. Um, what are some of those data sources? You talked about the teams and what you might be looking for, but what like internally in an organization, there are some pretty regular data sources that people go after. What are some of the key ones that you think about that you've trusted in and relied on over the years?
Yeah, I always start with finance because that's the cleanest version of facts there is. And so I always start with finance in terms of past performance and spend, and then future projections and future spend. So if they're seeing budgets coming up or down or being weighted slightly differently, we need to have that conversation. Without understanding where the business is trying to go from a revenue and profit standpoint, and what you've got to work with from an expenses standpoint, you're kind of, you got nothing. On top of that, though, those what I would always look at too is past marketing performance, and I would look at that by channel and by vendor. So each what I've learned is each industry, each marketing audience is different. They consume information much differently, and so what might work in LinkedIn in one organization, it's going to work much better in say TikTok in another organization. So you really have to get to know the channels and how they relate to your audience, what you typically spend, and what your relationship looks like there. So you got to gather your tech agreements, and you've got to understand what are you spending, what are you getting, and how are those performing. And then the conversations with sales are absolutely required. What are your units? In Insperity, we operate regionally. So we talk to all the regional leaders and say, what are you seeing in your market? What are your goals? What do they look like? What types of products are you trying to sell to who? And where are you really facing the most headwinds? And that shows us that marketing can help in those headwind areas. You got to gather your product roadmaps. You got to have releases. When? What are they going to be? Is it something that people care about? Is it something you can really make a big splash about? And then the last thing, but not the least, is I would gather up what's happening externally. So, what are these big key external things that are happening. Are there industry conferences that you need to leverage? Are there memberships that are coming up due? Are there legislation or financial or legislative or financial considerations going on in a particular region that you need to understand and leverage to make sure that your audience is educated? That's not an exhaustive list, but that's where I would start to understand, what does the year ahead look like? Where might I place my attention and therefore my dollars?
Yeah, that's really great advice. I think one of the things that has really impressed me in working with you through this process previously and really just talking to you since about it is that you have really honed and increased your sort of financial acumen and speak. And that's a really important skill to have in order to have those conversations with the CFO or the finance team. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the
Yeah,
importance of that as a marketer, during this process and even ongoing, of course.
absolutely. Yeah, I can't understate the need to be able to have real conversations, financial conversations with your counterparts. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but at the bottom line, marketing spends a ton of money. We spend a ton of money. We have lots of vendor relationships, we have lots of contracts. Our accrual process is really challenging. We use a lot of outsourced talent and agencies. And so our actual books, if you were to just look at marketing as a business, its own little business, our books are really complicated and they're big. And so if you come to the table without an understanding of how the money flows through the organization, then you're going to be a time suck for the financial organization. And you're not going to be able to best partner with them on, hey, if I were to delay this purchase, or if I were to look at doing a 2-year agreement rather than a one, you can't have those conversations. And you're not a seat at the table. So, in order to be an actual growth driver for the business, you have to be a business leader. And in order to be a business leader, you got to be able to talk about money. And that was one of the things that I worked really diligently on, is being able to understand how money flows through the books. And as a result, I think I'm a much better partner to finance, and I rely on them quite a bit, especially in the role of operations. I need to understand how marketing is performing from a financial aspect so that we can move things around as needed.
Yeah, and, I've seen you do that, and I think that's really it's been very crucial to having success in, like you said, not just the planning aspect of it, but as you go through the year and start thinking about how do you shift money around, and you're in your mind thinking about, "Well, how is finance going to react to this?" Or, "What are the questions I need to ask so I can go back to finance and either ask for a shift in funds or new funds," or whatever that is, right?
Of course.
Um the other side is sales, and of course, sales and marketing, talking to each other and collaborating is always important in everything we talk about, you know? But it's especially the annual planning, and this is an area that you and I worked on a lot together, when we were doing our annual planning, and that is really talking to sales specifically about what they're trying to achieve and how they're going to achieve it. I think a lot of times marketers step back and they go, "Okay, the sales number is this." And that's like maybe as far as they go and as far as they look. Maybe they look at it regionally or, whatever that is, or by product or something like that. But then it's the questions are really more about, well, how do you plan to get that number? What's the breakdown between net new versus customers? And then where do you need marketing's help? That's the key question, I think, is the one that we really worked on together with the sales team is marketing shouldn't be trying to help the overall number all the time, right? Like, what's the big number we're going after that you need marketing to push up, to your point? Um,
Yeah.
what are some of the key questions, or I guess those are the questions, but like, what are some of the key takeaways you need from those discussions in order to one equip your team but also to be able to go back to sales and have those conversations later about this is what we decide, here's the line we drew in the sand, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a tough one. That's a really, really hard one because it requires them to do some work too. And of course, they've got their own annual planning process to do. And the hope is that as marketing and sales, as the revenue producing machine, that we're aligned in how we're doing that work. That doesn't always happen, but you can get there similarly, right? So, for example, one thing that I would really always love to see is the math. Show me the math. Your goal is to go out there and get X. How are you going to break that down and do it? And that starts from the very top. So for the whole organization, our revenue goal is this, our sales goal is this. Show me the math. Where does that come from? Knowing what you know about our retention rates, about our penetration rates into the market, show me the math about how you're going to get there. And that math tells us everything. It tells us, do we have a higher focus on retention in a particular region? Do we need to penetrate a brand new region or a brand new market that we don't have before? Are we making a huge assumption here or there? That tells us that we need to spend a ton of awareness dollars over in this new market, or we need to spend a ton of customer enablement dollars over in this retention area. So having that conversation about the math, show me the math, it's a shortcut to all other kinds of decisions. And if you can't get anything else, get the math, because sales has to create quotas. They've got to create the math. And so it's just about sharing that and coming up with that joint storyline based on it. But to your point, we can't be everything everywhere to everyone all the time. And so nobody's funded that way. And so then the next conversation is, all right, I see the math. Where do you see the biggest headwinds? Is it that you're trying to sell in the Northeast and nobody knows who you are yet? Okay, cool. That tells me I need to spend there. Marketing can help with that problem. We are made for that.
Yep.
Is it around, hey, we have so much incoming volume over in this area that our time frames for working leads are too slow, and so we're losing them. We're leaving them on the vine. Okay, I need headcount. I need SDR headcount or technology solution to help qualify those leads. So it's that conversation around, where are the headwinds?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you feel like it's just too big of a leap? And let's talk about what that leap looks like. So it really is that two-way conversation. You got to keep working at that to have an agreement with sales. You need this. I think we can help you with this. And that's what this might look like.
Yeah. And I think the challenge, and I know I'm assuming you face this too, but a lot of the challenges is that sometimes sales doesn't come up with that number and that
Yeah.
math until like January. So like, what are some ways you can overcome that issue, and really be proactive in your planning so you're not waiting till January of the following year to have a baked plan?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's not just sales, it's everyone, right? Like the fiscal year might end for most companies on December 31st. And so it would be so nice if on December 31st, even December 1st, you said, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen next year. That'll never happen. So
Well, and
I
let's face
always,
it, there's not a magical line on December 31st and Jan 1 that changes everything, right? Here we
there's
do
not,
pretend that sometimes, don't
there
we?
really is not. You're exactly right. So the ball drops, nothing magical happens, really just things continue.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. We continue things. And so I always advise treating Q1 like a Q5. And I always say the words, spend it like you have it. We know enough at the end of the year to be able to make some pretty prudent decisions about Q1. And if there was something magical that happened in Q1 that was revolutionary, we would deal with it. But let's face it, typically we don't get thrown huge curveballs that will change your whole budget and go to market structure.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to feel comfortable in the ambiguity of saying, I think I know enough. I think our paid search spend is really not going to change that much here, there, and everywhere. We know these events are coming up. Let's spend it like we have it, and we will adjust it later if we need to. That's all you can do.
Yep. Yeah. That's really
Yeah.
good advice.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've gone through the process of collecting all the data. You've had these really hard conversations. You've got all the information you need. What do you do with it? Like, how do you take that and like actually create a plan?
Yeah. So that's a good question, and that's where a lot of people will stop and say, "Oh, now we have a plan." Well, not quite, right? So now you have all the ingredients to a plan. And the way that I like to ladder that down into what do we actually go after, is I really like the OKR framework. So OKR, for those who haven't used it before, stands for objectives and key results. And the OKR framework is really just a formula to ladder your strategic objectives for the business down to specific results that you want to achieve in marketing. And so in our business, we have key success factors. that are true for our business. These are business strategic factors that have been put in place by all the higher ups that say that if we do these things, we will achieve the things we want to achieve as a business. That's a wonderful North Star for us. So we take that and we bring that down and we say, okay, for next year, what are marketing's objectives? And those support, actually, we draw a tracing line from each of marketing's objectives to the overall business's success factors. Typically, those objectives don't change a lot year to year unless something in the business changes. But what does change is the results that we look to achieve of each of those objectives. So, for example, we would say at a very high level, this is like way less actionable than I would ever implement, but marketing needs to enhance the organization's reputation. That's an objective, and it ladders up to something that the business wants to achieve. But this year, our key results to see if we've actually moved the needle on this will be maybe about a brand awareness survey here, or about consideration here, or we want to expand our reach in these networks. So that's where it actually starts to feel real. We're going to do these things that support these objectives, that support the company's strategy. Again, that's not enough. We go all the way down, and I like to tie the marketing's wide objectives into individual performance goals for the year. So an individual can look at marketing's objectives and key results and say, "Ooh, these are the five I can touch these. I know what to do
Yeah.
about generating leads. I know what to do about increasing customer satisfaction. This is what that looks like for me." So
Yeah.
my performance goals for the year directly tie to a key result, which then ladders all the way up to strategy. And so the key to me really is allowing each individual in the organization to find meaning in their work at the very highest level. It says, oh, I'm not just bidding on ads, bidding on keywords for ads. That actually boosts my lead generation capabilities, and that actually touches my revenue, and that actually improves my company's performance in the 5-year horizon.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's right. And then you give your team purpose and meaning, like you said.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you also have the ability, like the organization knows exactly why marketing exists for the next year, right? And what they're actually running after in their priorities. And that's an easy thing to communicate. One of the
Right.
things,
And
and
maybe
just,
even more
okay.
importantly, not running after. And so
Yes.
those objectives communicate what are we doing? These are our key results. Everyone's aligned around this. We socialize those with everyone. I don't mind sharing with anyone how I'm measured, how marketing is measured. We say, this is what we're working on.
Yeah.
You want to come to us with something new. How does it enhance these things? Or do we need to renegotiate these things? Does that stand in place? Or is it not a priority right now?
Yes. Like to your point, you can't be everything to everyone all the time.
Yep,
Nobody's funded that
exactly.
way, nor resourced that way.
Yep,
Shameless plug, one of the things that Inverta that we help with is we have what is called a plan on a page, an annual plan on a page, and it does that exact almost that exact framework. It matches sort of what you talked about. And it aligns the marketing objectives, those key results, and like what are we going to go do to achieve those things? And it
yeah,
gives you a one page sort of mi- resource to be able to do that socialization inside the organization. It's not a 50 slide, 100 slide deck. That's
yep,
great. You need some of that material to be able to back up what you're doing. And here's why we're doing that. And here are the key, like the little things we're going to go do and where we need your help. But to have that one page sort of view to go like, here's marketing's plan
right,
for the year. And then, and then they know to your point. And then you're just communicating back to that. Remember, we talked about this thing?
right.
And to your point, if something changes, now we can go back and renegotiate. Okay, you said we got to go focus on this now. What on this list are we then going to change our focus on? Because we
Yeah,
can't just add. Additive doesn't work. We planned to, whatever 90% of our budget or whatever the number is, right?
exactly, exactly.
I think that goes to that kind of adaptive planning
Mhm.
as well. It's like now that you have a plan and you've socialized it and everybody's like, "Yeah, let's go." Hopefully, that's what they've said. Um,
Yeah.
how do you adapt as the year goes on to that plan that you put in place? November, December, January.
Right. Yeah, the best laid plans, right? Well, hopefully, if you have anchored your plan to a broad, longer term set of business objectives, then the foundation for your plan doesn't change too much. What does change is your tactics. Every once in a while there'll be like an M&A activity, or some external event will happen that you need to react to. Those curveballs, they always happen. But if you have anchored your plan and your objectives in the company's strategic goals, then likely those won't change very often. It's the tactics that change. And that's where you have to have absolute transparency and understanding of your budget, and the trade off decisions that need to be made when those things come up. So, one thing that happens all the time is like, you learn new stuff, right? So, we try to go to market with this tactic, with this message, with this cadence. It didn't work. We learned that didn't work, and we need to pivot to plan B. That happens all the time. Does that mean that we need to redo all of our plan? Absolutely not. Our plan remains the same. It's the avenue that we get there needs to change. It's like the recalculating on your GPS. And that's what you do. You go back and you recalculate. So to me, there is a sweet spot in level of detail of planning, and I will not go below a certain level. So if we say, here's our plans, these are our key results. Okay, now let's talk about how each of our marketing leaders will get budget in order to achieve those results. I trust that they are able to balance within their budget day to day when those things and those changes happen. So it's a big amount of trust. And again, that underscores the need for marketing leaders to have great financial acumen, so that you don't have to be monitoring and having those over the shoulder discussions all the time.
Sure.
We trust that you'll stay within budget, that you're looking at it, and then you're going to make good financial decisions, because we trust that you have the financial acumen to do those
Yep.
things.
Yep.
What I would say though is that, you know, I would allot time every quarter to do a look back and a look forward. What did we plan on spending? On what? And what did we actually spend? And then, okay, so how does that change things for the next quarter? And that just helps you reorient yourself around that North Star that we talked about before, which is, things change all the time. Now let's make sure that we're not going to end up in a hole at the end of the year, or we're not going to end up in a surplus and it gets taken away at the end of the year. We just will
Yeah.
continue to recalibrate quarter by quarter.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good advice. Something we've been talking a lot at Inverta about too is like right now we're talking about annual planning because you're ending the calendar year.
Yeah.
We're in Q4, but it really is an ongoing strategic planning. And if you aren't doing annual planning the way we're sort of talking about today, like that's fine. Keep doing
Yeah.
what you're doing, but at some point maybe you've got a lull in 2025, like in your business cycle or something. Like, take that time, take a beat and do that strategic planning. It doesn't have to be around an annual plan calendar. You can do that work in the middle of the year if you needed to, right? And sort of
Right.
reset what you're doing. Um, I think what you said too about um it being very complex in most organizations, but you can make it as simple as you want. And like you said about having that sort of sweet spot, you can overdo it, right? Like, I mean, you are a data nerd. You love to nerd out on data, but like you could really go too far.
Yep.
Um, how do you find that sweet spot? Like you found it, but like how do you know when you've hit it?
Well, the nice thing is, if you use a framework like objectives and key results, then you know what you're aiming for at the end. And planning for anything more granular than that makes it so that you're boxed in.
Yeah.
I've worked with organizations who want to create, let's say, performance goals at the channel, region, sales office level. Imagine what would happen if that sales office closed.
Mm,
You got to redo the whole thing. But to say, hey, in the collective, we want to create X, then it gives you a lot of freedom within that X
yeah.
to engineer how you're going to get there. So to me, there's the financial spend part of it, which does need to be more or less settled. You know how much you're going to spend with vendors, on what. You know that you have fungibility within those spend, more or less. If you know how your books work, you know which money you can move around easily and which you can't. So that gives you flexibility right off the bat. We don't need to go down to the dollars, go down to the $10,000, maybe the $100,000, but I would say 10. Um, but for the performance goals part of it, honestly, the performance goals, what we need to do to drive the business forward is typically an accumulation of things. It's not, I have to do these 100 things. It's that I have to do a group of things to make these happen. We all know that about marketing tactics.
Yep.
So creating performance goals that are too granular boxes you in and creates these false senses of red, yellow, green on performance, when really what you need to be able to do is construct your performance with a combination of stuff. And you need flexibility in that to test and learn.
Yeah. I think the flexibility too, something I talk to companies about is like make sure you're planning for like that 80%,
Yeah.
then you're kind of locking in to your point. Like otherwise you don't have any flexibility. You've planned to 100%.
Right.
And whether that's budget or headcount people resources and human
Yep.
resources, capacity, those sorts of things. And
Yeah.
if because then you're not leaving yourself any leeway for those sort of things that might happen in the market or an opportunity that arises. We got to go run after that. And now you don't
Exactly.
have the ability to do that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, how many times mostly at the end of the year, does someone come to marketing and say, hey, we have a little bit of a budget surplus. What are you going to go get? What can you get quickly? And the
Yeah.
answer is like, oof, I mean, I think we can turn up the spigot on a bunch of leads, but I don't know if they're going to be good.
Yeah.
Maybe we buy a bunch of billboards. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, and so you always have to kind of have a plan. Like if somebody were to come to me with a pile of money right now, what would I spend that on that would actually produce meaningful results?
Yep.
And then vice versa. If an opportunity arose in the marketplace and I wanted to act on it immediately, do I have the funds to do it? And so, some people squirrel a little bit away, and I like that
Hmm.
because I've never not been able to find a use for that money.
Yeah.
It's a tactic that's performing really, really well. It's a tool that we need to purchase. It's consulting that we need to drive something forward faster. So squirreling a little bit away is good. It does take away from what your run rate looks like everywhere else. Nobody likes that, but it's for a good purpose in the end.
Yeah. I think it's that sort of almost that rainy day fun, right? Like I like the
Absolutely.
squirreling it
Yeah.
away. That's a good
Yep.
good.
Yeah.
I love that little angel funding you might get and October 14th rolls around or something and they go, "Hey, I got can we do
Right.
for?" And now we got to go find our magic fairy dust and,
It's true.
put
And
it on
you know
sale.
what? It's a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
It's the expectations that come along with that end of year funding are usually unreasonable or unattainable. It's usually, hey, we're just going to inject money into this marketing machine and then money will come out of
Yeah.
the machine really quick, like in a
Yeah.
month. And what it ends up doing actually is derailing all of the work that you've done all year, diverting focus away from the things that will really matter to close out the year strong and just starting this spending spree. And I'll tell you, one of the hardest things I ever had to do in marketing was spend money quickly.
Mhm.
And that was really hard with the contracts you have to put in place, with the transfers. It's very, very difficult to even just spend it quickly,
Yeah, so
nonetheless
true.
produce results that the business is, whether they say it or not, they're wanting the results. That's why
Yeah.
they want to give you the money. So those are a proceed with caution kind
Yes.
of kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
And
to your
sometimes
point, like,
that's
it
the price
also
of no.
it's also like, hey, the business believes in marketing. They know that the machine works. So that it is like a blessing and a curse, right? At the same time.
Yeah.
Um, what are some of the pitfalls that marketers should be like on the lookout for as they're doing their annual planning and putting that in place?
Yeah, I think one of the pitfalls is just not doing planning at all and assuming everything is going to be just fine and you'll achieve your goals. I call that allowance planning, which is,
Yeah.
hey, give me my allowance. I usually get this much money a year, so can I have my allowance and I'll just spend it as I need it throughout the year. That's a pitfall. That is guaranteed to have you spending a lot of money for sure, producing some results, yeah, but are they going to do anything for your business? I'm not sure. And so not doing planning at all that's a pitfall.
Yeah.
The next pitfall, I think, is not taking the opportunity to look at what worked and what didn't. So again, a lot of people, even if they get their, they ask for their dollars, they base it on past spend. That's fine. But what if your past spend didn't produce what you needed it to,
Mm.
and you need to shift now to something else? There's this real value in looking hard retroactively at what you spent and what it got you to figure out, do I need to do that anymore? Let me pause these three channels and see what happens.
Hmm.
So not taking the opportunity to really look hard at your performance. The last one I would say is to take it personally
Ah.
and to treat it personally. If you are unwilling to look at what the business needs from you and provide that to the business because maybe you're uncomfortable about using a new skill. Maybe this is a new combination of tactics you haven't used before or done before, or you're not quite sure about, like the experiment feels very uncomfortable. Or, you know that these two or three things didn't do well last year, but you're kind of embarrassed to say that. you know, Marketing is about trying and failing and trying and succeeding, but mostly it's about doing fine, not excellent. Sometimes you'll see excellent, but it takes a lot of failing and fine to
Yeah.
get there. And so the ability to look honestly at, hey, I thought this was going to work. This was my hypothesis. I tried this thing. I learned these things and it didn't work quite the way I wanted to. So next time I'm going to do it differently. The ability to pivot is our growth. That's our growth mindset. And so reframing this idea of, hey, I spent this money, it didn't work out, that's a failure. It's not. It's absolutely growth. And so that's where I see people get caught up is that they take it personally rather than looking at an opportunity to grow and change and improve
Hmm.
based on the level of performance that they saw in the past.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, especially because I mean, we work in a profession that so much changes so much all the
Yeah.
time. We've talked a lot about AI on this podcast, but we'll also talk in the future about how the buying journey is changing, how buyers are buying differently than we're actually set up and like think about
Right.
it too. Like demand gen has this engine that runs, but is it really aligned to how the buyer buys?
Yep.
Um, we'll unpack that in a later episode. Please stay tuned. Um, but I think that's a really good point is you have to have a growth mindset going into it, and, like, goes back to that, don't get boxed in. Don't get
Right.
boxed into what we did and what we put on paper in November, and in June, you go, "Oh, but we said this," right? Like, have that
Right.
flexibility, have that growth mindset, have those ongoing conversations with your sales leaders, what's changing? What are you guys seeing? Are you changing how you're, going after things or, like, have you adjusted your numbers and, things like
Yep.
that? 'Cause sometimes they do that. We don't know it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so it's, about time for us to wrap up, Tiffany. I really loved having you on the podcast. Maybe we'll have you back. We'll
Same.
talk
I
about
love
something
being
else.
here.
Yeah, great. So we have we sort of try to wrap up with a pro tip segment. And so that really is just like what's an actionable takeaway that somebody listening today can really just take and do immediately to start moving down the process of a great annual planning.
Yeah. The thing that I would do if you could do nothing else is to go gather your organization's strategy. It should be published somewhere. Gather your strategy, think about what marketing is actually working on, and try and draw a straight line between what you're working on and the organization's strategy. If you can't, then start having the conversations about, why are we working on this? Does it actually align to something that promotes our strategy, or is it something that we think is necessary, or we've always done it? And so that's why we continue. So the first step really is understanding the organization's strategy and goals, and making sure that what marketing is working on is promoting those goals and not doing it just because you think you should.
Mhm.
So it's not really a pro tip. I would say that this is a 101. Like, this is the first place to start. Really look hard at what you're doing and whether or not it matters.
Yeah, that's really good. Oh, and I'll note in the show notes, I'll also link to Inverta has a free annual planning sort of
Yes.
workbook. that we offer. So please go download that. You can use it to start thinking about how you might outline that so you don't have to start from scratch.
Absolutely.
Just something to work from there. So, well, great, Tiffany. Loved having you on the
Me
show
too.
today. Thanks for talking annual planning. It doesn't feel so scary. I mean, it's a big undertaking, but the
Yeah,
outcomes are so worth it. And to your point, if you don't plan, you're probably scrambling in 6 months from now, anyways. So
absolutely. Yeah,
great.
thank you for having me. It's been great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rev Room today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. For more, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Don't forget to follow Inverta on LinkedIn for more updates and exclusive content. That's Inverta, Inverta. Have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover? Reach out and let us know. Until next time, keep innovating and driving that revenue growth. See you next time.